It's time to harvest my ginger and turmeric, but the real magic happens when I preserve it. I'm going to share with you 3 different ways that I preserve my ginger and turmeric so that it lasts all year round. And not just for cooking, but also for natural remedies. This was my first year growing ginger and turmeric, and I learned a lot. You know, you go online and you research all these plants and they tell you, hey, they like shade, they don't want to be in full sun. And so I did an experiment, as I usually do, where I had 3 containers that I was growing my ginger and my turmeric in. One was in complete deep shade, no sunlight whatsoever. The other one was in more like partial sun. It was probably only getting an hour or 2 of sun. And then I had another container, which I'll show you in a little bit. It's a rectangular container that I grew in complete full sun. And I learned very, very quickly that it does grow in shade. The plants will grow, but the roots are not very productive in shade. And that's what I found as I was going through both of these round containers. They were the partial shade and the full shade, and the plants were beautiful when they were growing. But as I was kind of pulling out the roots here, I realized very, very quickly that the one in deep shade had almost no roots. The one in partial shade actually had a good amount of roots. Not as large as I expected, but it was still a good harvest. The one that did the absolute best was the one that was in full sun. I had it in this rectangular container on my patio, and it grew the most abundant roots. So I have learned from this experience that, you know, sometimes you just have to try these things yourself to see, you know, whether the online stuff or the things that people tell you is accurate for your particular garden. And in mine, yeah, definitely full sun. If you want to grow the plants for just being pretty, you know, like in a shaded area and you just want to grow some plants in your shaded area, they definitely can grow there. I'm just not sure I would harvest them within a year. It might be something that I would plant as a perennial to have beauty in the garden and then maybe wait a year or 2 or even 3 before harvesting them, because I feel like they just grow very, very slowly in that level of shade. The other thing I really learned through this process was that soil for these guys, they do like a rich soil. The one that I fertilized more was the one that was in full sun, and that one seems to have produced better. But also I noticed that it's really hard to get the soil off when you're using like a potting mix, which is what I used. I used Pro Mix here. And I think the thing that I will do differently is that I am going to add more sand to the soil. And I'm just using my native sand to add to the soil because I feel like it was just so compact that the roots were having a hard time pushing through that soil. If you can see here, I am really fighting this soil to try to get these roots out. And it really shouldn't be this hard. I mean, it's like growing potatoes. It's really not that much different than growing potatoes. But the root structure from this potting soil was just so compact. I think that might have also contributed to some of the smaller roots that I grew, but adding something like sand, maybe even perlite, I'm not sure. I definitely something like sand would help, I think. So I'm going to try that next year. This is that rectangular container that I was telling you about. One of the first things I noticed when I started pulling them out was that at the bottom of the container, they had these like little like root nodules. They have an actual name. I had to research them because I was like, what are these little things? They're like little bulbs that were growing down deep into the container where the actual turmeric and ginger root was growing like right at the base of the plant. These things were growing super low down. I did learn what they are. They are like root nodules, and different people have different ideas of what they do. Some think they anchor the plant. Other people think that they are a way to preserve nutrients for the plant in these little nodules. They are edible from what I'm told. I'm not probably going to use them that way. I hear that they don't really taste like anything. So there were some surprises in this process, and it was fun surprises. I've learned so much in this 1 year of growing ginger and turmeric, and it's definitely a plant that I'm going to continue to grow. We love ginger and turmeric, but I do have to tweak the process a little bit so that I get a better yield. Now this is where I am going to replant some of these. So I took the ones that had the best root system and I'm going to replant them. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to take some of that old soil and the branches and stuff like that from the dead plants. And then I went and got some of my native soil that I had in my shed here from, digging out different parts of the yard. And I mixed that in, and then I added some Nutri-Rich fertilizer. It's a fertilizer that I get from Azure Standard. It's a very inexpensive fertilizer, and I really do love it. It's more of like an all-purpose fertilizer. It's not really, meant for tomatoes, and it's not really meant for lettuce. It doesn't have like super high nitrogen. It's kind of just a across the board equal amounts nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, which I like when I'm just doing an all-purpose fertilizer. And then I'm adding that soil back. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add some compost. I do think that they need more nutrients than what people say that they need, or at least what I noticed. I didn't add any fertilizer or nutrients. I just had the nutrients from the potting soil in it, and I think that they could have definitely benefited from more feeding. So by adding that Nutri-Rich, I think that that's going to help these. Now I saved the ginger and turmeric roots that I felt had the best root structure with those nodules on them, and I'm going to plant these. I don't know if this will work. Please don't take this. I am a brand new ginger and turmeric gardener, but I have like this idea from my years of growing different kinds of plants that if I take these roots, not necessarily the ginger and the turmeric rhizomes, but the actual root systems that are left over. There are some pieces of the rhizomes in these root structures, but I'm hoping that that way I can keep all of the actual rhizomes and I can replant these root structures and I will get, more plants. I don't know if that's 100% going to work or not. We're going to test that theory out. I will have a couple containers that I'm going to grow from the rhizomes just to make sure that I have a harvest next year. But I'm taking my 3 best root structures and I'm going to plant them in this rectangular one for the ginger, and then over in the 2 round containers I'll be putting 1 turmeric a piece, and this is where I'm putting in some of my homemade compost here, just like 2 or 3 scoops per container, and then I'll mix that in so that that feeds it even more. I couldn't tell from the plants themselves if they were getting fed enough. It was really hard to tell. They were growing beautifully. They had gorgeous, nice, green, bushy leaves when they were, in their prime. And they looked happy and healthy, even in the super shaded area. But I could tell based on, the roots that I didn't get very much. I got a good harvest. I'm happy with my harvest, don't get me wrong. But I definitely think that adding a little bit more nutrients through the year is going to help them out considerably. And I've learned my lesson. These are going to go on my pool deck. They did wonderful. The rectangular container did wonderful on my pool deck. So I'm going to bring in the round containers as well, and I'm going to let them sit here in full sun. Now these guys are not going to sprout until I get warmer weather, which is probably going to be more like the April time frame. Now here is the roots. These are the nodules that we harvested from these containers, and at first, when I pulled them up, I thought, oh, I don't really have that much. It was really hard to see these roots because they were just compacted with this soil. But as I'm sitting here spraying them off, I'm realizing that I have a lot more than I thought I had. I'm actually very pleased with this harvest. This should last us for several months for the ginger and the turmeric. But next year, I really hope to get that ginger nice and big. Now I'm going to show you 3 ways that I'm preserving this ginger. We're going to take about, I don't know, a little half cup of the ginger and a half cup of the turmeric. We're going to set that aside for one of our projects a little bit later. But for this first group of ginger and turmeric, I'm going to slice this up and we're going to freeze dry it. This is my mandolin. You've probably not seen one that looks like this. I get this one because it's a safety one. I have cut my finger pretty bad in the past using a traditional mandolin, and then I found this one, which is I think it's called Safe Slide or something. I'll put it down in the description if you're interested in it, but it really changed the game for me for using a mandolin and being able to slice things julienne dice, as well as, you know, what we're going to be doing here, which is just very, very thin slices. I want the very thin slices because they're going to freeze dry better. They're going to freeze dry more thoroughly if I keep them very, very thin. But doing them very, very thin means that you have the potential of really hurting yourself with a mandolin, or at least I do, especially with these very small pieces. So having like this little safe mandolin has been like a lifesaver for me. So we did our turmeric first. Turmeric stains everything. I want to prepare you for that. It stained my fingers, it stained my mandolin, it stained the bowl, it stains everything. And it wasn't even that wet when I was cutting it, but be prepared for that. It's going to stain your knife. It stains everything. The next one we're going to do is the ginger. The ginger kind of shocked me a little bit because as I was cutting it, I noticed that the inside of the ginger was blue, like a sky blue. And I thought, what's going on here? Is something wrong with my ginger? Was it the variety? Because I did grow several different kinds of varieties. I couldn't even tell you the names of them. I'm so sorry, guys. I didn't keep the tags. But I was really worried at first. So after I got done, you know, slicing it up and putting it in the freeze dryer, I looked it up and I found out that when ginger gets cold, it will turn blue on the inside. Totally edible, nothing wrong with it. It's just, it's got like this blue hue and it kind of threw me off. I was like, why is it blue? I don't think it's supposed to be blue. I've never seen blue in the grocery store, but it's very common. I'm harvesting it in winter. My winters are a little bit colder than what you would expect in Florida, and it's just my microclimate, but my ginger must have gotten a little bit too cold while out in the garden. I probably should have harvested it sooner, but either way, still edible, still great nutritional benefits. One of the reasons why I love freeze drying things like this is it maintains, I believe it's 90 to 95% of the nutritional benefits, where if you dehydrate, you're losing probably closer to 40 or 50%. And, you know, canning, obviously, you lose a significant amount. I'm not sure there's a whole lot of canning recipes that call for ginger and turmeric. So freeze drying was my most preferred method of preserving the ginger and the turmeric, while maintaining as much of the nutritional benefits as possible. I only had, you can see, I'm like, this is the smallest amount of freeze drying I've ever done. Usually I fill these trays to the brim, but ginger and turmeric doesn't last very long in the refrigerator. It will last a little bit when it's fresh, but my ginger and turmeric didn't look like it had matured at the level that I wanted it to in order for it to like sit on the counter for a few days. So I'm like, I got to get this done as quick as possible. So I got them in the freeze dryer with some other things like some herbs and some medicinal plants. And it's probably the smallest freeze dry that I've ever done, but it was done in like record time. It was like 12 hours and it was all done. The other one we're going to be doing is similar to what I do with my garlic, which is minced ginger with some oil. I didn't do the turmeric because we generally don't cook with turmeric that way. We use turmeric as a medicinal plant. We don't cook a lot with it. So with the ginger, I put it in my food processor with a little bit of oil and I let it mince itself down. And then what we're going to do is after, you know, we have minced it down as far as possible, we're going to add this mixture into these little cube trays. This is a silicone mat. And I use this for my garlic when I'm making minced garlic. And so we're going to use it for minced ginger. So then I just scoop in the ginger with a little bit of olive oil in it. And then I'm going to spread this out onto these trays. I'm going to add some more olive oil to top it off. And then we're going to freeze these. I freeze them overnight and then I pop them out of the freezer little cubes here and I put them in a Ziploc bag. You want to freeze them in advance so that way, you know, when you need to use them, you can just pull out one little puck and you're not like trying to break off a chunk of minced garlic or minced ginger from, you know, this big chunk. You never know what amount you're using and when you do it that way, and in this way it's just a little bit more convenient. If you don't have these little cube trays, you can also use like an ice cube tray. You can make use a cookie scoop and create it and just put it on some parchment paper and then freeze it, and then you have the same result of pucks. When I want to use one of these, I'm just going to pull it out, throw it in a little cup, and either let it defrost or just throw it straight in the pan. when I'm cooking. And I love to use this when I'm making stir fries. I might make it when I'm making my egg roll in a bowl. Ginger is just so amazing. I used to buy the minced ginger in the grocery store, and it's good, but I feel like this stuff is stronger. When you grow it yourself, it is so much more potent. It has so much more flavor, and that's the same with the minced garlic from the grocery store as well. So getting it, throwing it in the food processor and letting it freeze overnight, for me, it's a little bit of extra work, but for the flavor that you're going to get for the entire year, it's outstanding, and I absolutely love using these trays for this. By this point, the freeze dryer is done, and so I'm going to get the ginger and the turmeric out, and I'm going to put them in some glass jars. My plan for using these is to use these to make fire cider in the future. You can see how crispy these things are. They just kind of break apart. They feel like styrofoam at this point. But I'm going to put them in a glass jar. Normally when I freeze dry things, I put them in Mylar bags, but this was not the biggest harvest, obviously. So I know that I'm going to use this up within a year, and whenever I have a freeze-dried item that I know I'm going to use up within a year, I just put them in a glass jar. I don't really use an oxygen absorber if I know I'm going to use it in the first year. I just put it in a glass jar. I vacuum seal the glass jar closed, and that usually is good enough. I'm going to use this for fire cider this year. My husband absolutely adores fire cider. I do too, but he really loves it. He takes it every single day. It's supposed to help with immune boosting support, and it's just like a really nutrient dense liquid. I'm going to show you how to make that in just a second, or how I make it. But I want to preserve this ginger and turmeric so that I can use it in the future, because this stuff is not going to stay good, and I feel like it's going to do better freeze dried than if I just freeze it in pieces. If you don't have a freeze dryer, because I know they're a little bit pricey, you can dehydrate them. You are going to lose some of the nutritional benefits, or you can freeze them like we did with the minced ginger, but you can freeze them whole. And you can take them out and use them in a fire cider later on in the year, just like I'm going to do, but with the freeze-dried stuff. As a side note, I was really excited about this green herb that I made. I took chives, green onions, and society garlic, which is like a green plant down here, and I made a garlic and onion herb seasoning. Oh my gosh, is it so good. I just did it kind of on a whim to fill the trays of the freeze dryer so that I wasn't just putting 2 trays in, and I gotta tell you, I am stoked with this new seasoning. It is so good. The last preservation method we're doing is the fire cider. Fire cider is basically where you take a bunch of different medicinal plants. I'm using rosemary, I'm using Ceylon cinnamon, I'm using our ginger and turmeric harvested from the garden. I also add in peppers, onions, lemons, limes, oranges, and a lot of people also put, hot peppers in theirs. I use sweet peppers because we don't like spicy, and a lot of people add horseradish to theirs. Once again, we don't like spicy, so I'm not adding that. So I'm missing out on some nutritional benefits of that. You put that all into a jar. I'm using a half-gallon jar here, and then you fill it with apple cider vinegar, and you're going to let it steep in the apple cider vinegar for 6 to 8 weeks. After the 6 to 8 weeks, you're going to filter out all of these little veggies and seasonings, and you're just going to be left with the apple cider vinegar. After you're at that point, then you can kind of mix in or heat up a little bit of honey so that it's liquid, not like heat up super hot because you want the nutritional benefits of the honey, but heat up just very lightly so that the honey has a viscosity to it, and then you can add that to the filtered apple cider vinegar that's left over after these vegetables have steeped in it. One of the things you'll notice here is I'm not peeling anything. Oh, I forgot, you're supposed to also add garlic. I didn't have any whole garlic, so I didn't add that this time. But you don't have to peel the garlic. You don't have to peel the onions. You can just toss them in there because we're going to take all of these veggies and fruits out when we're done. So it doesn't really matter if the peels and the slices and stuff are in it. It's fine. Once you've added the honey to the vinegar, you're going to want to place this in the refrigerator. It can last on the counter, but it gets like cloudy and weird, and I'm not a big fan of that texture. So I put mine in the refrigerator, and that honey and the apple cider vinegar preserves the nutritional benefits in the liquid, and it lasts about a year in the refrigerator. So this is a really great way to use up a lot of different vegetables that you might be coming out of the garden. It's not fermenting. I think it's more what's considered an oxymel. Fermenting would be salt and water. So you could potentially do a ginger and turmeric ferment. You could also just do the ginger and turmeric in the apple cider vinegar and have a flavored vinegar. And that would be cool that you can use later on to make more fire cider. I hope this encourages you to grow some ginger and turmeric in your garden. Happy gardening, guys.